So now we're going to learn Kiri Roshi. Kiri Roshi is your two-handed cut, a finishing cut. Kiri means to cut, obviously. Roshi means to drop. Kiri Roshi, we start all of our Kiri Roshi for Bato Jutsu, or Bato Ho, from an overhead position. Not really a kamae as such, but it's going to be a fluid transition from Nukitsuke to a Kiri Roshi. So we can start the cut anywhere from a 45-degree angle down to about parallel to the floor. The kisaki shouldn't drop too much past the back of the neck. Notice the tsuba is in line with the back of my head. Okay? As you grip the sword, we want to make sure that our hands are coming from this direction under the sword and not from the sides of the sword. If we come from the sides of the sword, you'll notice my thumbs are actually on top, and that's an improper grip as we spoke of before. We want the hands behind the sword so that as I raise the sword, now my grip is under the sword itself. From this position, when I cut, if I'm going to cut straight, I extend the sword not downward in this direction, but I always want to extend the sword toward the kisaki, upward, to create my cut. Pushing through the kisaki, extension, and then downward and back to me. The cut is created in an elliptical pattern, not really in a circle. So we want to create a big ellipse by going up, outward. Once the arm is fully extended from the shoulder, the sword begins to move back toward the body. Incorrect cutting, I would be pulling the sword downward rather than pushing it upward. And the sword has a tendency to bounce at the bottom of the cut. So we want to make sure that we're pushing through the kisaki, outward, wrists are locking, sword is traveling back toward my body. It's also important that we're sure to never cut toward our front foot. If we're going to do any type of a Quesa cut, which we'll learn shortly, we're always going to be doing a cut toward our back foot. So we're going to be switching feet on each cut. Switching feet. If I'm cutting right to left, I always cut toward if I'm cutting right to left, I cut toward my back left foot. Vice versa, if I'm cutting left to right, I cut toward my back right foot. As I change position in cutting, I do not want the kisaki to travel on this plane. It's readily seen. It transmits to my opponent what I'm going to do. The way I create the cut is by turning my wrist in this position, on this plane, so that as I approach from the front, that cut, a straight cut, a cut from right to left, or a cut from left to right, all starts the same way. Moving through the kisaki, upward, and then creating the angle. The most fundamental two-handed cut is Kiri Roshi. Shimabukuro sensei will now demonstrate the most fundamental Kiri Roshi, a straight downward cut through the center line of the body. Notice the finishing position. The kisaki and the blade are parallel to the floor. The second Kiri Roshi we'll explore is a Migi Keisa. From the overhead position, Shimabukuro sensei will step forward with his right foot and then adjust the cut with his hands on that plane. Keisa refers to the angle of the monk's robe, cutting from the neck to the hip. Notice the kisaki stops on line with the left hip. From a side angle, you can see that the sword is at a 45-degree angle, drops no more than the back of the neck. Notice Shimabukuro sensei is cutting toward his back left foot when he's cutting right to left, and never toward his front foot. When cutting in Kiri Roshi, the sword should never drop below the back of the neck. This posture is much too low. Instead, from Jodan position, The sword should only drop to the back of the head and the cut from there. The second Kiri Roshi is a left to right cut. This is called Hideri Caser, cutting from the left. Sensei creates the angle of the blade above his head, pushing through the kisaki and then into the cut. Once again, notice the kisaki stops in line with the right hip. From the Jodan position, Shimabukuro sensei extends through the kisaki, turning the sword and cutting toward the back right foot. The Hideri Caser, the sword ends up parallel to the floor.